Drenched in a grim and desolate atmosphere and driven by an unnerving sense of paranoia, The Witch, despite its weakness as an occasionally dull and scurrilous effort, is a thought-provoking and uncomfortable portrayal of family and religious values being brought into question by unprecedented predicaments. There's also a witch. Set in New England during the 17th century, a family of Puritan Christians are exiled from their plantation for religious reasons, forcing them to live alone outside a dense forest that ominously towers over their new home. After a series of strange and startling misfortunes, the family become increasingly distressed by their circumstances, believing that something unnatural is happening, and thus the suspicion of witchcraft leads to major concern. Marketed under the assumption that it's a horror film about a witch stalking an innocent family will create the expectation for something this film truly is not. As someone with a soft spot for horror films, especially those with an unorthodox and daring premise, I was also tricked into believing The Witch would have a heavy emphasis on horror and suspense. But while the film initially starts extremely strong and absorbs you into its very cold and brooding world, driven by an unhealthy but prevalent anxiety of being judged upon, very quickly does the film's pace grind to a lingering halt, as it focuses exclusively on the tension between the family during a time of dire hardship. It's worth making it extremely clear that while The Witch is a horror film from a technical perspective, in essence it's actually a period drama. Think of it this way, if M. Night Shyamalan's The Village had a much more focused and coherent execution, The Witch would probably be closer to that outcome. The film doesn't hide its intentions, nor should it. It places most of its concern on the controlling grip that religion had during a time when superstition ran rampant. The Father William, played brilliantly by Ralph Ineson, perpetuates the true horror of the film, the fear that God will judge harshly and strike down upon the family. It's interesting how debut writer and director Robert Eggers uses imagery and suggestions to symbolic and critical effect. The constant failure of the crops to grow and bizarre behaviour of the animals does make the film very unnerving, and both the characters and even the audience begin to question whether it's simply bad luck or the witch's influence. After the first disturbing encounter with the witch, it sets the tone for the remainder of the film, as there is this persistent presence that just makes every scenario in the film even more tense, even when scenes appear to be as peaceful as they can be. The fact that the witch barely makes an appearance yet still continues to have an influence on the emotional weight of the narrative is extremely commendable to the power of the filmmaking. Visual and technical details aside, however, there is this unavoidable tediousness to much of the film's second act. I find the film beginning to become a game of patience as it focuses on trivial matters that, while fit the context of the film and the time period, did little to keep me engaged in the drama all the way through. Quite frankly, while I hate to use the word boring, the film can be kinda boring. In fact, despite being someone who can tolerate a slow burner, I did find myself becoming increasingly restless. There's only so many times watching a man chop wood can keep your attention. Even when it came to the more horror-driven moments, the film is never actually scary more than it is great at heightening the suspense when needed. But there's never a payoff to the tension, which makes the sudden scene transitions very unsatisfying and devoid of any lasting impact. In all, The Witch has an interesting appeal. While it's certainly a very mature and interesting horror film, your enjoyment will largely be influenced by having the right frame of mind for this particular style of storytelling. It's a period drama that is closer to being more of a psychological thriller in how it uses imagery and cinematography to emotional effect. And the film's implications and subtext were admittedly challenging, I'll not deny this, especially given the cryptic nature of its delivery. It's a very bold and ambitious debut film that highlights a very strong understanding of filmmaking to tell a story visually, whilst also having a coherent understanding of how to use Old English dialogue when necessary. While it may not have gelled with my own sensibilities and I didn't exactly enjoy the film as much as I wanted to, I greatly appreciate it for what it's attempting to do. The film fundamentally and unquestionably is not for everyone, but if you're craving a very different kind of horror film, love great visual storytelling, and you're open-minded to obscurity, The Witch is very much a modern retelling of some good old-fashioned folklore.